other panelists up to the stage to join us. And while they're making their way up, I'll just share this little story with you. Last night I was in the showcase, and it reminded me of something that Blair just said. There was a gentleman standing there with a virtual reality headset on, and he didn't say what was going on, but I watched him, and apparently he was, whether the vision was off or whatever, and I see him go, and I thought, that tap thing is never going to go away. Okay, before we start, before I take questions from the audience, and I hope that you do have some, I'd like to ask our sponsors in particular here, these gentlemen here, what are you seeing from your customers in terms of their needs or wants for convergence, and how is your company responding? Are they expressing any interest or using digital twins? Let's start with Albert.
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think you saw some of it today in this presentation, and you know, simulation. You can do a lot with a little. So having some fundamental tools built in for doing simulation is important. The convergence issue is really it's a big one, because you look at the OT, ET, IT. We see it in that you know, new systems are flattening the model, where you don't have multiple layers of networks and so on, and you have IT capabilities that are now being pushed into the OT system, like cybersecurity, advanced cybersecurity, and not just cybersecurity defense, but also cybersecurity detection. So anomaly detection and intrusion detection capabilities that are then resident, you know, in the system. So it's very much alive, and I think it's definitely the way of the future.
Okay, Dennis.
Sure. It's all over the board, I think, is probably the way I'd say it. The best description I can give you, there's a lot of talk, a lot of buzz, a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation, a lot of differing ideas, even within individual companies, right? So, although there are some that are starting to get, you know, more structure to it, a better vision and a path forward lined up, I think where we find we're playing these days, at least with the part of the organization that I work with, is helping organizations kind of figure out what that vision looks like right now. Where do we want to go? What do we want to look like? I think there's a, you know, there's a little bit of the wave a shiny thing in front of people kind of syndrome here. You've got part of the group that really wants all the cool new stuff, and we really want to go out and do, you know, cutting edge experimentation, and then you've got other parts of the organization, get back to IT, whatever part of that is, that are saying, I got problems I got to fix, I got to solve these, help me with something that gives me some value, not where I'm just off experimenting. So we're, as consulting organization with that, some of that technical capability, we're probably quite often playing a role of helping to bring that together a little bit, to get a little bit of both, longer range vision, et cetera. I think on, you know, I don't have a super depth on the digital twin, but what I see and hear around Emerson, I think there's a lot of that going on, more in the new greenfield type of operations, and making sure that that's part of the build and the setup, and that's available to reduce construction time, setup time, engineering time. See more of that. Converting the brownfield to digital twins, I think you're more in line with those more tactical type of things that we're seeing examples of here this morning. Not saying it doesn't get there, but there's a significant cost to get a, quote, you know, the real sexy digital twin thing going, and, you know, a lot of brownfield operations aren't, at least what I'm seeing, aren't doing that right yet.
Yeah, probably it's so much easier to do in a greenfield, obviously, than a brownfield, so I can understand that. Russ, how about you?
Thank you. To a certain degree, Dennis stole my thunder a little bit, but that's okay. No, not at all.
You should have talked before.
I guess I should have sat left. We're seeing try not to repeat too much of what Dennis said, but among the organizations we're involved with, very much the same. A lot of buzzwords, a lot of talk, a lot of interest, a lot of shiny objects out there. Try to be polite. A tremendous lack of strategy around the space, meaning not really understanding exactly what we're trying to achieve. A lot of little initiatives spinning up. You know, I have some immediate needs, maybe a short-term goal. This is what I'm trying to achieve, but how does that, how does that fit within an overarching strategy? And that's probably the biggest hurdle, the biggest obstacle that I see in almost every organization, and that's truly across the board. It's pretty rare that we get involved in any organization where we go in and this whole IT, OT, ET conversation comes up and someone can concisely say, this is the strategy, this is truly what we're trying to achieve. We have a very thorough understanding of our process flows, our workflows, our data flows, the two-way bi-directional data flows within that end-to-end process also. So it's still being pieced together. I hear a lot of conversations throughout the conference yesterday and today, talking about change management, cultural change, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see it too terribly much as kind of an atypical change management. I see most organizations are embracing, they want to. A little bit of a fear factor because it is such a large, complex topic. So a little bit of a fear factor is exactly how do I jump in? Where do I start? You know, what's the proper starting point? And so that brings on some hesitancy. And I think that also brings on the hesitancy of bringing it up to a strategic level also. So try not to repeat too much what you said there.
How about any questions from the floor? Okay, you're not getting out of this because here's one. I have plenty, so don't worry.
So the question is for Blair. I love the advice around industrial AI. And the question is that advice don't do it or don't try it yourself type of advice where people need Lakeside to do it? Or can people do it on their own?
Of course. No. My advice is go out there and approach vendors with the fact that you want to be involved in this process. And if they start answering we, then you have a problem, right? Start to ask, how do you deal with culture change? How do I get involved?
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'll throw one. Oh, here's one over here.
I have a question, and it seems like the analytics problems that you're solving that you just talked about for this particular equipment, how do you take it to the next piece of equipment that is different?
Oh, no, it's a good question. Assuming it's for me. So we have, and that was one equipment. We're doing multiple at the same site and now doing some globally. So first of all, there's no such thing as a model library. It can get you there, and if you think if someone's going to say, hey, I've done this before, right, they're lying, very bluntly, right? You do need to train a model because you're not going to get the sensors in the right place, right? But the methodology is the same, and the adoption rate became a lot easier because they're already used to a platform. And I'm a firm believer that the world doesn't need another platform as well, right? So one of the things we're doing is we're taking those values, we're taking those predictions, and we're writing them back into their host system, right? Because an operator's already used to these screens, are already used to going into their historian. The minute you can write them back in these values, whether predicting a future value or telling them they have an anomaly, it's coming back to the screen that they're used to seeing, right? So the minute you start talking about that there's a lot of value in that.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, Steve Zitney from the Department of Energy. This is a question for Blair. I guess in the spirit of the title of this session, the IT, OT, ET convergence. So from the perspective of the engineering technology, for your autoclave example where you encountered the compressed air problem, it was something that hadn't been encountered before. So, I mean, if we can use the engineering technology, the engineering models, a dynamic simulation of the equipment of the plant,
Yep.
Where we have that model that we can introduce faults and see the
Yes,
results to augment then your data analytics.
Exactly. So
model.
one of the biggest challenges is, in order for what people are calling these failure models to work, is it has to seen that failure data in the past. So if I come to you and say, hey, that $20 million turbine, can you mess it up for me? And then after that, we're good, I got it, right? That's not going to go over too well, right? So there's two methods, and Cortic.ai has addressed that with their platform, but the modeling is a great way to do that, and that's where domain experts come in, right? Because they know exactly what that pattern will be, and that you're spot on.
And maybe one comment in line with that. We're a number of the projects we're working on, we're not necessarily doing the AI or the machine learning type of projects to replace expert tools. So what we're actually doing is taking the results that are coming from expert tools like vibration systems and other things that actually say, hey, here's a high-end problem, here, something that's more specific. We're not trying to recreate the analysis. So in addition to sensor data maybe in a control system and data that's in Pi, we're actually pulling data from these expert systems and bringing that and putting that in front of the analytics application, if you will, as an input. And again, pushing that back out. So we're seeing some pretty good value out of doing that also. Don't just take, if you will, raw data. This is semi-processed data from an expert system that's providing an additional insight.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I see about this convergence question, particularly from the ET side, is we're trying to build engineering expertise into our software. And however, Blair, you made it very clear that the subject matter expert is never really going to go away. So all of you that are subject matter experts, I think your jobs are safe. Don't worry. But any comments from the rest of the panel on that?
Yeah,
Any
just
thoughts?
like, I'd like to add another point. We do all this work in building these high-fidelity operator training systems, which are really physical model-based digital twins in a way. And so, I mean, it's systems like that based on some first principle modeling that could be used to address these issues.
Daniel, anybody?
Repeat the question briefly.
I think what we're trying to do with the ET, in converging the ET, is to build the subject matter expertise into the solution, into the software. So, but the job of an SME is not going to go away. So, any comments on that?
Just full agreement. It's the data scientist side of that, if you will, is invaluable. But the idea, again, I understand patterns. I can maybe, if you give me enough information, I can dissect where that occurred or what might have caused it or where to go look. But you don't always have that data, right? It's beautiful. It works beautiful as a data scientist, in my opinion, if you've got every ounce of information and data that you might possibly need. But at least right now, what happened to that system in the past, the problems you had, the failures you had, a good chunk of that resides in somebody's head. It might be some of it in a CMMS, but it never has all the data. It might be in a quality system, but it's never quite there. So you know, until all that stuff really just is there, you're gonna have that SME requirement to get a fine end result. I mean, you can do some stuff up front, but it's not going to give you the learning model you want, I think.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in? No comment? Okay. Okay, Dale.
Hi.
Hi.
Awesome presentations, by the way. So you've done anomaly detection beautifully, and I have full confidence that if anybody wants to apply these data mining tools to their data, that they're going to be able to accomplish anomaly detection. And I think sometimes people get a little confused. I kind of think of data mining as what we're going to use for anomaly detection. Tell me if I'm wrong, because you know this better than me. And then when it starts to have meaning to the different classifications of normal or anomalous data, then you start to get into machine learning. And so where I'm going with this is, every time I've ever done a project, I have a mental picture of where I want to go next with it. Where do you want to go next with it, where you start using probably the SMEs to teach this anomaly detection to become more of machine learning and diagnostic? Where do you want to go? What's like your next project to get to the next level with this?
No, it's a great question. So where it's going is, and here's the reality: is we said with the turbine, you have to wait for it to break. At the end of the day, doing condition monitoring, I know for a fact, and I've done hundreds, thousands of pumps where we've gone in and we said, hey, that pump's going to break sometime soon, right? We never had a crystal ball. So I think with machine learning, it's the first time we're actually going to get to predictive maintenance. But to say you can go from nothing to remaining useful life is a far stretch, because as Dennis put out, you need all your data in one spot. You need good historical failure data and all that kind of stuff, right? So where I want to get with this is, and I've always said this, is we'll detect anomalies, right? We'll say, hey, this is an anomaly, but the reality is that failure could be exponential, right? It could fail tomorrow, and we just see that anomaly, the hockey stick curve, right? The Canadians will use a hockey stick, right? End of the day is, what I've challenged the end user is, I'm not going to be able to prevent every one of your failures. Here, that's the God's honest truth is, you're still going to have failures, but at least now we have the ability to say we've captured that data and we can learn from that. So at the end of the day, what I'd like to be able to do is get enough data where I can confidently say, before you start that batch, you have this level of confidence in it completing it, right? But you need a lot of data. You need to see all the types of failures and stuff like that.
Yes, sir.
I was going to add just one quick comment on where it goes, because Blair mentioned predictive type of stuff. I'd add another term in there, prescriptive analytics. So at the end of the day, getting well past just saying I have an anomaly, even down to say there's a problem with this component, actually generating the action you should take, down to I should replace a seal, I should replace a gasket. I'm giving very engineering-based answers there, but it is that machine. It is the teaching of the models. Blair also talked about building in and utilizing failure modes and effects type of analysis work, and that FMEA actually drives a lot of the what's the actual true cause if you work it backwards, and what can you do about that piece. So it is that subject matter expert. It may not be the process expert, but it may very well be the maintenance expert that says, yeah, if I have that issue, here's what I got to do to correct it. But you build that into the system. One of our customers, they just basically say, you know what, in reality, I don't even care what the software is, what the application is. What I want you guys to give me is, what do I need to do now? And I think that's kind of at the base of all this. Yeah, great, it's beautiful to have data scientists, and we got engineering within our organizations, but at the end of the day, I want to know what I need to do, when I need to do it.
So when you say build that into your system, do you mean that your same interface that's got the output of your AI is also going to have the input of your operator saying what he actually found, what that was, and what he did to repair it, so the next
Absolutely.
I-
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, future view of that, absolutely. There's a bit of that that's manual now, but you start tying that into the existing systems again, and I think that's part of that future.
And that's a
Not
good
too far out.
a good point, Dale. Is at the end of the day too, and I've heard it again, but there is going to be false anomalies, right? It's a reality. There's a reality, and you got to deal with it, right? You don't want to get to a point where you have alarm flooding, and we have to go back to basics. And but in the day, as I said, that model's got to get retrained. It's called reinforcement learning, and what we did is we've built in this project is built in thumbs up, thumbs down. We give this anomaly, so thumbs up, okay, keep on going. A thumbs down, there is a chance that there's a unique pattern that we haven't seen before. You never put whatever it is in the autoclave or something like that, right? And you got to be aware of that, because and further that point is, it's not just process parameters that can be an input to a model. So when you start to connect and get to the IT world and stuff like that, is you start to grab stuff from your CMMS. It might be a certain operator that always causes an anomaly. All of a sudden, hey, every time Joe Smith's on, right, I get this anomaly, right? You start to say, hey, it's the Joe Smith anomaly coming up, right?
Albert, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, on an anomaly detection, conversation is process specific. From our perspective, anomaly detection is the technology we're releasing for cyber anomaly, which is as devastating potentially to a process as anything that could happen in a process, anomalous behavior. So, anomaly detection, the trend for us is to ensure that it is integral to the controller, to the system itself. It's not a promiscuous device that's looking at the overall network, but specifically to the high-risk control and I/O and networks related to automation. That's one. Number two, that is real-time. So it's running in the real-time operating system. It's running in real-time mode in microsecond, millisecond kind of speeds, because cyber, often you only have seconds or fractions of a second to respond. The other thing is to ensure that it's derived by the user in a standard way. So it's presented to the user through OPC UA calls or through standard query language calls, so that it can be trended, alarmed, historized, and done in the way that's most appropriate for the user, and that it's free. So integral, transparent, high-speed, real-time, and free. And that's the direction for cyber anomalies. That's my opinion. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Anybody else?
I do.
Sure.
I'm actually going to very directly answer. You asked what would be my next step for the anomaly detection, my next big project. My next big project would be for you all to want that, to do that analysis, the stuff that Blair did, because the more prevalent it becomes, driven by you that can afford it, the more likely I can afford it.
I'll give you a good deal,
Very
Jason.
good.
And
He
you
has an
laugh, but
ulterior motive.
that is the struggle that we face in the water wastewater industry. Is we tend to get the hand-me-downs. You guys are in Industry 4.0, and to us that's like Industry 0.5. We're like, hey, a PLC. But
Just a sec. That's actually a good segue into this question, if you hold yours for just a minute. What is your experience about Industry 4.0? Are plant personnel familiar with it? Do they know what the capabilities are? Are they ready for it? Do they want it? Are they scared of it? What do you think? Panel.
You started that in.
Okay. So my first response to that is technology is not a linear adoption, right? There's many plants out there that have not adopted. You need fundamentals, of course, right? But it's not a linear adoption. Especially in predictive maintenance or prescriptive maintenance, I've heard this a lot saying I haven't even implemented rope-based condition monitoring. So that's great. Right? But that's fine. You can go from one to the other. You can leapfrog technology, right? Just as we're seeing with smart cities and things like that. You can leapfrog technology. But what I'm seeing for the first time is actually the strategy is being driven from the CIO down, not from kind of the level we're used to selling at, right? So this is a strategy that from a top level has been developed. It's more like, I don't know how you're going to do it, but go implement Industry 4.0, right? And so the first time I'm seeing it being driven down from the top, which I think is great. And I'm also seeing a lot of IT people, which is great. I'm obviously OT, but a lot of IT people getting involved, which I think is great. And I think there's a few people here that I've met that are truly going to be the adopters of Industry 4.0 because they have bridged the IT, OT world.
Okay.
Industry 4.0. No, in wastewater, our operators have no idea what that means. That's just not where the arena that they play in. They know what automation is. They know that I have it. Do I know what Industry 4.0 is? Absolutely. I'm one of those early adopters. I'm glad you didn't read my bio, actually, because if you haven't tell, I like to make jokes. And the end of my bio says, my passion for cutting-edge technology is curbed only by my budget. It's a very true statement. Didn't realize how many sales vendors would latch onto that and find me while I was here, but that's another story. But it's true. I love technology. I love the shiny toys. I tell my children all the time, I have the best job in the world because I get paid to go to work and play with stuff that I like to play with. So it's a lot of fun. So I push for automation projects. Our operators don't know what they don't have and haven't seen. Again, we lag as an industry, so some of these things they just didn't know they could have. Predictive failure analysis, my maintenance department wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they could see failure before it actually occurred and stuff blew up and stopped running. So no, our operators don't really know what it is, and they don't know that they want it until we start to show them. One of my tricks when developing SCADA projects especially, we'll design a screen to 80%, and then put it in front of them. And that last 20%, they can design it very, very fast. They can easily find the bugs and the stuff that works for them. But if you come in there at 0% and say, hey, we're going to make a whole new process for you, or we're going to optimize this process and we can do stuff with automation, what do you guys want? They just kind of stare at you and they're like, well, we want it to do what it's always done, because they don't know what they could have. So
Good point.
teaching them how to overcome that is a struggle.
Russ?
Yeah, again, much of the same. As everybody is adopting, some degree of 4.0, I still see many organizations. What does 4.0 mean to your organization? It's not a generic. It's not a generic implementation methodology, strategy, et cetera. So a lot of fragmented implementations. I like a lot of the themes that we've heard about SMEs and so forth, because much of this, when it gets pushed down from CIO down and so forth, at the end of the day, you find out that there was not enough SME involvement in the implementations, and you end up with even more of a fragmented implementation at that point. So that's about everything that I see.
Okay. Dennis?
Agree, fragmentation. I'll give you a couple examples. It still comes down to communication at this point. I think the IT folks, the shiny guys, the shiny thing in your eyes side, know about it. They love it. They're jumping on it because, you know what, I'm seeing budgets. So I can think of 2 or 3 different companies where they've got their experimentation budget for, there's a guy with the title of Industry 4.0 lead, for example, in one company. But they've got their multi-million-dollar, good-sized company, but multi-million-dollar experimentation budgets laid out over the next few years. And that's going to be, what is it? What could we do? Because they're looking for that transformative major thing that they can put into play. Plant level, it's about, again, what can I do to improve my lot right now? Just this week, I've had 2 different conversations where we're talking to the plant. They want to go out and fix a problem. They want to bring some of the technology in the Industry 4.0 type of stuff. I don't know if they could say Industry 4.0, but they want to bring that level. And then a day or 2 later, suddenly, the corporate IT organization gets wind of it and kind of goes, what are you doing? You can't do that without me. So we're still seeing a lot of that, right? And so there's knowing about it, and then I think at the plant level, even when we talk about it rudimentary, and indicate what it means is, Industry 4.0 is, in simple terms, Industry 3 was computers, PLCs, et cetera. Industry 4 is this next level of technology. They kind of get it, but I think that's the level.
Okay.
What was the question again?
In your experience with your customers at the plant level, are people familiar with industry IoT? And do they want it? Are they anxious for it? Are they banging down your door to get it?
So, there's a quote that technology, people should not, bend to technology, but technology should bend to people. So any technology is only successful as the user experience. And so as this automation stuff and robotics and everything squishes down and the architecture gets flat and computation and memory and communications goes lateral, you have dozens to hundreds to thousands of devices that are computing. What really matters is do you improve the ease of use, and do you reduce life cycle cost? Otherwise, it's a disaster. So, of course, every company, virtually anyone that's working for any company, it's a commodity. It doesn't matter what you make. It's a global market, and it's a commodity, so you got to squeeze pennies out of everything. So the only thing that should matter fundamentally in the presentation and the use of 4.0, IoT, or anything is how is it saving me money, and how is it making my life easier? So that's what really matters.
Yeah,
and,
agreed.
And the tools have to be, and again, I just want to focus on cybersecurity because it's so important to me, and it's going to be so important as this architecture flattens and this thing happens. your attack vector, your security profile decreases, your attack vector grows exponentially. You must have cybersecurity. These devices must be secure. For security to work, it's got to be invisible and it's got to be free. That's the only way. So yeah, that's certainly what everyone wants. And if you can build a technology, you can deliver a solution that's going to make it easier to use, longer life cycle, reduce life cycle cost, then you got a winner.
That's an interesting point that you made about it's got to be free. Yeah, okay, I'll supply you a solution, but if you want it to be secure, this is going to cost you so much more. That wouldn't be a very good business practice, would it?
Well, no, but it has to, and I mean, for early adopters and for the technology to converge, and for people to spend the R&D to make this happen. I mean, it's very, very, very expensive to make it work. But sadly, if you don't go for the long shot and you're willing to go long and deep on this in the investment, you're not going to get mass adoption. So people can understand the value proposition of an application. They can understand the value proposition of a piece of equipment. But they can't understand the value proposition that something as ethereal as cybersecurity. So if you went to your smartphone and you wanted to go Bank of America and they said, well, you want an insecure transaction or do you want a secure transaction? Now, if you want an insecure transaction and transfer money, it's free. But if you really want to protect your money, it's going to cost you $5 to go to your bank account. There's no way you're going to do it. But it costs Bank of America millions, and it costs the infrastructure for e-commerce billions of dollars to make it free and invisible to you. So that's the way it's got to happen, or else it's never going to work.
I pay for it in the low interest rate.
Yeah. Your patience, sir. Thank you. Your turn. Turn the mic on, please. Maybe.
Blair? Okay, good. So this question is for Blair. You said you value more the human expertise part in your project, which is the right thing to do. So did you automate the expert knowledge into the system, or how did it work? Or did you base your application based on predictive models, or how did you deploy the system? What does it contain? I mean, what's the combination?
So there's all different ways that an SME puts their input into it, right? They said even even before you hit machine learning or artificial intelligence in terms of the FMEA and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm assuming your question is going more to the model building and stuff like that?
Okay, in AI?
Yeah,
in
AI, yeah.
Model building doesn't necessarily mean like machine learning or predictive models.
Right.
You could base it based on expert rules, fault propagation, reasoning engines.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And absolutely. It's a very valid point. And what I haven't shown is part of the platform we used has a rules engine. So there's a lot of value in the rules. So I dismissed it with a factorial of 32, but the SMEs created their own rules because there is a great value which a traditional rules engine can solve, right? So the subject matter expert actually played a big role in just creating the rules, and they actually created the rules on top of the machine learning as well, so that all the machine learning, I shouldn't say all, but what it's doing is it's giving us an anomaly score of 0 to 100. They had to create the rules on what they were comfortable with on, when to set it a low alert or a high alert and things like that. So these subject matter experts actually creating those threshold limits of the output of the machine learning as well. And they also had, so what happens is, let's say we have an asset, we haven't had failure data, which is common, right? Everyone that says, I have my data, my SMS or CMS is perfect and my historian's perfect, it's lying, right? And so we haven't seen a failure yet. What we've done is we give them the option of saying, this is what I think the failure would look like based on my domain knowledge, right? And they pick 3 options of what it looks like, and it comes back and saying, based on that, you should use this model and stuff like that, right? So they're always playing a role into what's coming out of that machine learning. I didn't answer it, did I?
No. Okay, I'll ask a very simple question. Did you use forward chaining capabilities or just?
Right. In terms of, in this case, no, but we have done in other projects, yes.
Okay.
Right. In terms of, again, the modeling that we had earlier, discussion around earlier, bringing those modeling and stuff into it, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
We could talk offline.
Okay. Anybody else? There's one.
Great job, guys. Question for Jason. In terms of your adoption, you kind of jumped technologies, right? And you specifically highlighted that the project saved cost and you save time. Looking at the holistic life cycle of things, you've introduced now new aspects of cybersecurity that have to be managed. You've introduced a new platform. Can you speak on where, as a facility, you guys went in the total life cycle cost of increased in training, personnel, access? Did that go up, down, stay the same? Kind of where did the facility end up at the end of all of those projects?
Fair. Okay, just on. Well, as Al stated, the cybersecurity is free, so you don't have to be Blair to analyze why we chose it. So I had to. I'm the process automation manager. I like using that title because it makes it sound like there's so many more people I manage, but it's really just me. I'm a team of one, so I manage myself pretty well, actually. No, training cost was next to nothing for us, for me to manage it. But realistically, there was a learning curve to look at a new platform. Now, like I said, Codesys is kind of there's a huge global repository. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's an open platform, which I think is good, but there was a learning curve. And you know, if I had people under me, there would be some cost to training for that, but PLCs are PLCs. Logic is logic. So the cost involved in that, not really any different. The cybersecurity aspect of it, we've increased that posture. You know, like you said, there's not really a cost to add it in there. There's a benefit gained from some of the protections that we've put in that we didn't have before. So there's not really a cost in maintaining that side of it. Maybe learning like certificate management. And, you know, there might be a little more investment in learning some of the IT stuff that exists, but OT people that have things on a network ought to be learning some of that cross-trained IT stuff anyway, or very good relationship with their IT departments. Does that answer that for you?
Yeah, I think in a larger organization, I'm more interested in the administrative cost and how to move the rest of the organization between getting network patching to occur and all the things that were part of your project that you save cost on, but now it's a life cycle of maintaining that.
As far as the total life cycle, we haven't had it long enough to compare it to our other PLCs to know, is this truly going to last? You know, is this a 20-year product? I mean, of course, we're told it is, but I've never had a salesman say something's not what I want. So I don't know that yet, but we're not seeing a need at this time. I'm not seeing where it's going to be any different total cost than our existing process controllers. Thank you.
Hi, this question is for Blair and Dennis, and others in the panel too. How much, you talked about the need for SME knowledge. How much of a variance are you seeing in different industries, with respect to actually SMEs being there who understand all these different pieces of equipment? Is it based on the industry? Is it based on the size of the company? And what are you guys seeing? Because if you have to build these models, you really have to rely on them. So what are your experiences?
Yeah, so there is a varying, but there is a common, there's no way, at least I haven't seen it, there's no autonomous plant out there yet, right? You can get to smaller, and we've done work for water treatment plants. Somehow we fit it into their small budget, what they have, right? But at the end of the day, there is an SME somewhere on that plant, unless it's a full autonomous plant, there is an SME. Now you get to some of the bigger organizations, of course, there's SMEs, and you can actually have a battle of SME knowledge, saying, I know this better, we should do this in this way, right? Which is actually counterintuitive to bringing the SME in. So I don't think there's a specific industry or plant size that has a certain level of SME knowledge. What we are seeing, and it's, everyone's going to agree, is around a lot of SME knowledge is leaving, right? And that's a big problem we're getting, so that's why we're trying to capture as much as we can. And I think AI is actually going to have a big part in retaining that knowledge and transferring that knowledge over to the younger people coming up.
I would take a slightly different view of that and say it's actually based on the type of culture an organization has, on how far the SMEs or when the SMEs are involved and if they're involved. I gave a couple examples earlier of just even a general lack of communication, but you've got organizations that view this as, this is, my domain over here and our domain. And you know what? What's that guy on the plant floor really going to add to this? And you've got other organizations that are view this just the opposite. Those are the guys that know what's going on, and why would we even be doing this if we weren't leveraging what they're doing? And I think the latter is also thinking probably a little more forward thinking from the standpoint of, not just saying, hey, these are technologies that are kind of out there and we'll get, we want to see what we can do with them. But they're forward thinking from a standpoint of behavioral change and changing the organization and the culture and making sure that this stuff is sustainable. I'd kind of put it in that bent of what's the culture of the organization. Ones that have a more participative culture, I think you'll find are going to involve those SMEs more often.
Anybody else?
To play on that, just more of a thought, really, because I don't know how other industries experience this, but I know for us, an automation project tends to scare certain people in saying, I'm going to lose my job. So we have a hard time finding some of those SMEs in our facility when we go to do one of these projects. That cultural change you're talking about, they don't want to step forward. They don't want to share that knowledge because as soon as they do, they're afraid they may be irrelevant. So.
Good point. Russ?
I hate to say it, but my thunder was just stolen again. So I was going to say something almost identical. You have to you have to almost look into a crystal ball and know when you have to go seek those SMEs and kind of extract that knowledge out of them. For the exact same reason. Some of them are fearful of the loss of job. That's always going to be there. It's intuitive in human nature. Out on the floor, they hear the word automation. There's X% that's the first thing they're thinking, okay? They have a wealth of knowledge. They're saying, hey, I'm retaining this knowledge, okay? There's also just using the true definition of ignorance, just sheer ignorance. I have all of this knowledge up in my head. I don't even think that I should step forward and bring that to the table, okay? So you have to know when to go extract that also, okay? And I don't want to make it sound like it's easy. It's not. Sometimes it's not, okay? But there's no perfect formula. How's that?
You got to get that tooth extractor out sometimes?
Sometimes.
Do you want to pile on
No
here?
comment. I want to keep my job.
Okay, so I think this will conclude. I hate to stand in the way of refreshments, particularly of the alcoholic kind. So again, the cocktail hour is in Crystal A and B. And how about a big round of applause for our panelists and speakers?